Hey friends out there in YouTube land, Robert Ham here with Robert Ham Photography. Today we've got another question and answer. I like to try to answer these the same day they come out. Didn't happen here, but we're going to go on anyways. This question is posed by CaptionPMODE, program mode, CaptionPMODE. He asks, in your opinion, could you give your wedding clients Fuji JPEGs out of the camera? And what profile do you like to use for most of your weddings if you were going to give them the JPEGs out of the camera? What a great question. This is a question that lots of photographers struggle with, especially when they first begin, because JPEGs offer us a little bit of shortcuts and they offer a little bit of extra freedom, and that's pretty cool. But I'm going to give you the short answer right now, and that is no. No. I never give clients unedited, unfinished work. A JPEG or a raw image from your camera on the day of the wedding or the day of the shoot, it's not finished. It's not done. If you think it's done, then I am sorry, but it's not done. Now, you may consider yourself, some people think that they're a realist photographer, and they might think that they're like this photojournalistic photographer. They might think you're not reporting the news story. You're chronicling a history, and it takes an artist. Remember, history, his story, okay? So when you're at a wedding, and you're photographing a wedding, you're telling the story of a wedding. And that's not just from one image or a dozen images or 100 images snapped straight out of your camera and then given to the client on a disc. That's no good. So there's the short answer. One other thing, if you're giving your clients hundreds of images or thousands of images, you're wrong. It's bad juju. We don't want to do that. We don't want to limit our clients, but I always make sure that I give my clients right around 300 to 350 total images from a full day wedding. That's important because we don't want duplicates. You want to curate. You want to be the guardian of those images. You want to tell the story, and you don't need 1,000 images. Remember, a picture tells 1,000 words, so you don't need thousands of images. You just need the right images. Now, let's get on to your more pressing part of your question, and that's the JPEG versus RAW debate. Back in the day, it was much more important than it is now, mainly because JPEG compression algorithms weren't as sweet to JPEG images as they are now, which means they weren't as nice. They left lots of different artifacts, as well as raw images provided all the information as they still do. The benefits for JPEG were additional storage within your SD card or compact flash card because they were smaller, as well as faster write rates, as well as faster production on the end. Meaning if you nailed your exposure and your white balance going into it, you could speed up your workflow on the backside. So what benefits were there to RAW? There were many. In fact, the same benefits to RAW exist today as they did then. You have much more control over your image because you have all the information that the camera collects from the sensor. Now, more importantly and more to your question is about Fuji JPEGs. We got to remember, Fuji uses an X-trans sensor, and for lots of my viewers out there, you may not know that that's a very important difference. That technology, the sensor array, the color filter array is different on a Fuji camera. It allows for quite a few things, but one of the most notable things is that Fujis are known for their JPEGs as well as their RAW quality, and they're known that they have much sharper images just out of this flat sensor, as well as a much better color saturation straight out of the camera. So this is the reason the CaptionPMODE would be asking these things, because he's saying, hey, they are really good. Could you give them to your clients? But the answer is still no. It's because we're not done with them. And a quick pro tip, if you've got a client that wants you to shoot and burn, that's a client you don't need to work with. Not just for your own branding issues. Everything you produce has your name on it. Someone will remember you, and you want to produce beauty. You don't want to produce mediocrity. There's plenty of that out there. But also for legal reasons. It doesn't matter what you think of the image and what they think of the image. Many different districts have standards based on what kind of professional thing is going on. So if you're a photographer here in the States, luckily there's not a lot of regulation, I should say. I don't know why I got caught up on that. There's not a lot of regulation. But other places there are. One thing that is important is the contract. Like, who is the artistic director when you go? Who is the one that can determine whether an image is deliverable or not? What are the basic terms for hue, saturation, color balance, and tone, not to mention exposure, that you should go by? You should have a contract which explains those things and names you as the creative director for the project, be it a wedding or whatever else, and names you as the one that gets to determine that. That will help alleviate any additional liability in the future. That means that your contract should have the customer, the guest recognizing your expertise and relinquishing their opinion. Because they're not photographers, they don't have an opinion on what a good image is. Remember, art is subjective. People can take a picture with their cell phone and say that it's better than yours, but there are technical things about the image that you want to address, and that's where you're going to begin protecting yourself. That's why giving images straight out of the camera, even with good JPEGs, is a no-no. It's because you want to differentiate yourself through your technique and your policy rather than just be like the guy standing to the next of you. The other part is branding, right? You want your images to look different. You want them to look better than someone else's. My images, even with Instax, we've got blue. You can see the yellow. I figured out how to use that camera even here. So the saturation and the color tones, even with a print medium like this, show through. People recognize that my images have a lot of yellow, a nice blue. They look warm. They don't look cold. I hate a cold wedding image. It makes me really, I don't like it at all. Plus, they have a nice saturation, a smooth saturation gradient. Even if they're vibrant, it needs to have a smooth gradient. And then they also are kind of contrasty. I like a contrasty image. That's me. And my clients can observe that through my book of work, my entire book of work, not just one particular wedding image. You will never get to develop that if all you're doing is burning straight out of the camera. The other reason is that there's no need to use JPEGs over RAW if you're worried about storage space. I got 256 gig cards in my cameras. Those are on micro SDs, so I can slap them into my computer, my Surface, or use them in an adapter in the camera. So storage is no good. Now, here's a time that I would say you could use JPEGs with light editing. And this is what I do. But I'll give you that situation in just one moment. If you're able to shoot and you're within a 1/3 of a stop or a half of a stop of your final tonal exposure, you're good. If you can nail your white balance, you're good. And if you produce images that have very little noise, you're good. If you can do those three things, then you're going to have a much better time bringing those JPEG images into Lightroom or whatever editing software you use, and then applying the characteristics that you like to use to your images so that you can have a final output. Of course, while culling the images as well. If you can do that, then you can save a lot of time on the back end by going forward and making sure that your input is excellent so that you have a great output. Remember, JPEGs lose a lot of data when they're compressed, so the most important thing you lose is the ability to correct white balance and color tones, and that's where lots of photographers struggle. So if you find yourself having to rebuild images in Lightroom quite a bit in order to make them deliverable, the answer is no, you should not use JPEGs. Here's how JPEGs help me in my workflow. Although I photograph lots of very large weddings, guys, I'm also photographing smaller weddings. I appeal to a very wide client base. On the smaller weddings where someone might hire me for 4 or 5 hours, I don't generally deliver the raw images from the develop. I always shoot raw and JPEG, but I'm locked on my exposure. I'm good. I'm within my own parameters that I suggested for you. That means that I can bring those JPEGs into Lightroom and spend quite a bit less time working them and then delivering those images with a boutique edit. Makes it a lot simpler. It also means that that's a more automated process. So my editing between my boutique packages as well as my standard packages is different, and I explain those things to the customer and client. I show them different images and why there is a difference between them. And it's not that the images look different on the surface. It has to do with how you're selling what it is that you're doing. Remember, editing takes time. So when clients are purchasing my boutique editing, I'm working with the raw files only. And I'm working with the raw files in a way as to develop them with a more boutique or even sometimes glamour shot approach. When I'm shooting and delivering what would be a lightly edited JPEG, I'm working with a client that wants maybe spend a little bit less money, but also producing an image that has a more realistic kind of outlook to it. Both of the types of images are beautiful, but you can have a portrait done and then you can have a glamour shot done. The glamour shot's going to have some additional editing done and you're going to need the raws for that. The portrait may not have that additional editing done. You may be able to get away with it just a little bit differently. However, the answer there was only to try to share with how you could use JPEGs in your workflow. And even then, I never deliver unedited JPEGs, and I always shoot RAW. I shoot JPEG plus RAW, because if I totally screw something up, I need the RAW file to be able to rebuild the image, especially if it's an image that has to be developed and delivered. I hope this has been very helpful for you. I'm Robert Ham with Robert Ham Photography. Catch me over here on Instagram at RobHamPhoto. You can see what I do with Instax. It's really cool stuff. And don't forget to find me over on Twitter and Facebook. Facebook is Robert Ham Photography. Pretty simple, just like right here at YouTube. I want to thank you for watching, and as always, keep shooting, my friends.